is joining us. Apologies for the delay. LinkedIn Live is not intuitive at all. And as someone who has been streaming, recording, YouTubing for some time, it's not easy to use. It's not clear where things are located. But all that aside, and it says my stream health is poor. I don't know what that means. Hi, Elizabeth. Thank you for confirming that we are live. Super confusing. Hopefully, the quality is okay and the stream health picks up. But welcome. We're so excited to have y'all here today. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is DEI trainings. It's something that I have been heavily involved in for quite some time now. So, really excited to dive into our discussion today. Um, I love to end a conversation when someone else yelling. Can relate, yes. Hi, Priscilla. So I'm joined today by my good friend and constant frequent partner, Karen Young, aka the professional adult, aka Baldy Einstein. And if you're not familiar with where that nickname came from, we'll have to update you later. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Adrielle. I'm a DEI thought partner. I'm also the author of the Inclusive Leadership Journal. You can find the link on my LinkedIn page. You can find it on Amazon. I'm the host of two podcasts. One is called Leadership, but replace the P with a T. I don't know what I can say on LinkedIn Live. And then the other is called DEI in 5, which is a YouTube podcast series. So please check those out. Lots of great information there. Karen joined me on a lot of those episodes on DEI in 5 as well. So definitely encourage you to check that out. But for today, we are here to talk about DEI training. So I'll just give you all a little context. If you're familiar with the way we usually have these discussions, Karen and I just are pretty much giving you a fly on the wall perspective of conversations that we have on a weekly basis at this point. And we had this moment some months back when we were like, we should probably just start recording this because these are great discussions. And we encourage you to engage with us in the chat. Let us know what you think. We like to think of ourselves as thought partners. So while we do have some expertise in the DEI space because we've both been working in the space for some time, we recognize that there's always opportunity for us to learn, to gather new information, to try new approaches. So please share things in the chat. But for today, we're talking about DEI trainings. I can't tell you how many times, especially over the past year or so, that people have been like, I don't want to waste my time. DEI trainings are a waste of time. They don't work. We're not spending any more resources. We're cutting them out, right? And it grinds my gears for a number of reasons. And I think it's because I recognize and I've seen so many organizations stay sort of attached to this traditional way of approaching DEI education, right? I think historically, a lot of people expect there to be like this one and done training, and people are going to just run off and everything's going to be fine. You're going to mitigate all bias, you're going to mitigate all types of oppression and isms, as I like to call them, whether that's sexism, racism, ageism, whatever that is, right? That doesn't work, right? And so I think one thing I always like to share with people in terms of how I think about DEI education is the difference between a training and a workshop, right? When I think about a training, let's say, I'm going to train you on how to use a phone, an iPhone. There are specific ways that you have to press buttons on this device to get it to do certain things. And you pretty much have to do it that way. That to me is a training. I'm going to teach you exactly how to do this thing. You're going to learn it and then you're going to mimic it. When we're talking about DEI, that method doesn't typically work. So that's why I like to use workshop instead, because to me it's more of a conversation. It's meant to be an engaging discussion with a facilitator, ideally one that is skilled, who is going to bring some awareness, teach you about some topic, introduce some best practices or things that you could consider implementing. And I'm not saying you have to implement them, but you can consider it, and then get you to reflect on the past, the current, the future, and how you might leverage some of those best practices moving forward and committing to them. So it's a lot of steps involved, right? And as you're hearing me talk, hopefully you can be like, okay, this can't be done in one training or even a handful of trainings. This is an ongoing process. But again, using this idea of workshops instead of training, I think helps. I've also seen people be quite averse to the concept of trainings, but when they hear workshops, I think there's like, oh, this is going to be kind of hands on and I can share ideas and we might do some whiteboarding and we might leverage some post it notes to share ideas or do some sort of activity. That's exactly what we're going for. So I'll pause there before I go on to my laundry list of other reasons why DEI trainings have historically failed, and then we'll get into what I think and what Karen thinks is working now and where we should be going in the future. But anything to add to our sort of level setting before we dive in, Karen?
Absolutely. I think that the difference between workshops and trainings kind of goes back to what we did in school. You know, you have your rote memorization of, say, multiplication tables, and you just sit and you memorize the multiplication tables. Yes, you will get it after a while. Yes, you'll understand what it is, but it won't actually sink in. Compare that to looking at how multiplication happens in practice, whether you're doing money management, whether you're doing word problems. It is a more application based approach. And I think that that is truly the difference between trainings and workshops. I think there's also a difference in the dynamics of power between the two. For a training, it is I am giving you information, you are going to shut up and listen. And especially for topics around DEI, that already brings up feelings of discomfort. And if you're already talking about something that's uncomfortable, to add in the discomfort of you shut up and let me tell you what to do, it just adds to another layer of just folks kind of closing down. Whereas in a workshop, it is again, I am facilitating the conversation, but we are all going to talk together. And I think that, Adrian, when you started this, you also talked about something that was super important is that we're learning together, where there might be things that I'm picking up from this conversation that I might be able to share in other conversations. So that's just kind of the didactic approach rather than to the communal approach.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, yeah, I think that's a great summary. My dog's gonna go off. She hears the person in the hallway. Um, yeah. So thinking about with that said, when you have a workshop, I think it's important to recognize that. And one of the things you mentioned was that people are already sort of like defensive or hesitant to enter this space or to have conversations or fearful or whatever it may be. And you have to understand that you are not going to complete whatever you're trying to complete within one session, within one workshop. This, again, has to be an ongoing process. Um, and historically, I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we've seen be problematic when it comes to DEI education, right? Aside from the one and done, I think a lot of times we're so heavily focused on awareness only and it doesn't go beyond that. And I see a lot of DEI efforts leaning into what I think we both kind of refer to as the low hanging fruit, the easy to do. I'm going to bring a speaker in to talk about their experiences as insert whatever marginalized identity or intersectionality. Great, amazing. We want to keep that going. But then what? What do people do with that, right? It's one thing to bring awareness, but it's another to say, okay, I just witnessed this thing. How does that relate to me, what I'm doing in my working environment, in my life, in society? And is there opportunity for me to perhaps do something different or to change something, whether that's actions, behaviors, or beliefs? So I always like to present those three things and make sure that people don't feel overwhelmed. You don't have to achieve change in all of those areas. In some cases, you may recognize things that you're going to continue doing because you're like, oh, this actually is supportive of whatever it may be. Another thing is that, with that said, I find that a lot of DEI education centers around just individual behaviors and not enough on our collective, um, you know, actions, behaviors, beliefs, right? And this gets into when we're talking about workplaces, organizational culture, and our processes, our procedures, our policies. And so I think we get so stuck on, oh, we got to roll out unconscious bias training. We need to go talk about microaggressions. Yes, you absolutely should, but it's so much deeper than that, right? And a lot of times those trainings themselves are again focused on the individual. Have you checked your bias? Have you checked whatever your privilege, your power? Yes, do that, but then we also again need to look at the systems and processes. If we are working together on a hiring team, are we actually promoting and designing equitable systems? Is it fair? Or am I leaning towards showing favoritism towards one person because of whatever bias I may have or that our collective organization has? And those things are really important to be aware of as well. Um, Other things I've seen, failure to address intersectionality. I think we're so focused often on race and ethnicity and then gender and sexuality. And it's natural because those are the areas we've done the most research in the DEI space. But we have to consider how various intersectionalities are interacting with our spaces and how we're supporting or not supporting them. Um, Other things, Karen, that you've seen with traditional trainings?
Um, that it's just unfocused. I think, and I'm pulling a lot of this from my product background. Even taking a step back before you get into, just like what exactly you're doing, I would ask, why are you doing this?
Yep.
Like, what exactly are you trying to achieve? What does success look like? Are you doing this because there is guilt involved? Are you doing this because you really do feel like you want to widen your doors of opportunity? Are you doing this because, frankly, you feel shamed to do it? Like, why are you doing this work?
Yeah.
And understanding your why then helps to determine your what and your how. And I think that a lot of organizations jump so far over the why and focus so much on the how and the what that the focus has just become kind of unfocused and just kind of, we're going to throw something on the wall and see what sticks. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see more of why are we doing this.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Um, I have some thoughts on that, but I want to touch on a few other things I've seen historically, and then we'll talk about things that work and what we'd like to see. Um, I also see resistance and pushback, and I think we've talked about that quite a bit. And there's like this whole idea of psychological threat. There's a great article in HBR that was based on some research by three folks, and I'll add the link to the recording after so people can visit and check it out. But they talk about various components of psychological threat and resistance being one of them. And I think it's really important to me that DEI education is not mandatory. If you don't want to be here, why am I going to force you? It's just going to, especially for me as someone who is designing a workshop, who is facilitating, which is not always easy depending on who you're working with. And I've been met with resistors in my sessions and they try to derail the conversation. Fortunately, I've been tested enough that I have the skills to keep us on track and know how to kind of, mitigate those situations. But if you don't want to be here, I don't want to force you. But I will say over time, especially if you have an organization that is investing in their DEI education, you slowly, and if they're really invested, you're going to slowly see cultural shifts and changes. And with that is going to come some misalignment for certain people that are in your organization. And they, from what I've seen, either have to kind of get with the program and eventually decide, okay, I get what we're going for and what we're doing, or they decide to leave the organization because it's not for them. And for those folks, to me, I feel like there's so few of them that I don't focus so much on that audience. And I think when DEI practitioners in particular spend too much time trying to win people over, you are going to get you burn out really quickly. I see it time and time again. So I just want to encourage people: don't make this mandatory. Don't try to force anyone into it. I think there is opportunity to try to introduce the concept and what you're educating folks about. And I've seen people transform where they've opened up over time, but not by force. Um, Other things I've seen, I know people are gonna hate that I'm saying it, but lack of representation. I have had clients be like, "Well, we don't know how this particular group is gonna, receive you. So we think we might need someone that, kind of looks like them or is older or." There's
I'm
so much
I'm
I want to
I'm
say.
I'm I'm making this face because, well, you know why I'm making this face, but
Yeah.
to the rest of our group here, it's because I look like this. And in my entire career, I have looked pretty much like this. And the difference is whether I was bald or not. And I've spent the entire my entire working career being like, so you're our insert title here, or you're the director of,
Hmm.
um, and being able to jump over that initial hurdle of, oh wait, are you supposed to do this or not? I mean, I won't derail it too much, but I literally had a conversation in an Uber yesterday where
Hmm.
I had a young man who couldn't have been any more than 25. When I told him I was a consultant and owned my own consultancy, and mind you, I have, I've got my fancy pants, nails on. I was bald. I had on like my little free people jumpsuit on, and he was like, "Wait, you're a consultant and you look like this?" Like, and I'm like, people hire me for my brain, not for my outfits.
Yeah, yeah. We still haven't gotten past that though, you know?
Right. But that's kind of circling back. That's absolutely something that I see in training is that you don't look like or
Hmm.
we're not as comfortable with. And
Hmm.
I think that some of that kind of flows into what I'm seeing in trainings, and that is I want the patina of training, but I don't really want training. And so
Right.
if you have someone that is of a similar group, similar age, whatever, that everyone can kind of go through the pantomiming of training or pantomiming of, development, but not actually do any of the work behind it.
Yeah.
And there is sometimes the challenge if you have someone who is from a marginalized or multiply marginalized group that, oh no, this person is just going to come in and yell at me and tell me how awful I am and just, oh, I don't want to do any of this stuff. Why can't I just have somebody who is a kindly old grandma who could just tell me that things are okay?
Yeah, it's really frustrating. I mean, I've had situations where I have been asked to co-facilitate, and it was clear to me that that was because the co-facilitator that I was partnered with was more digestible for that particular group. And I've also had a number of situations. I've done a lot of coaching with leaders, and one thing that I will say I'm proud of myself for being able to do is to create a space where I allow them to talk, and they build a level of trust where they get real honest. Um, and I've had people tell me, like, I was surprised when you first started talking. Like, basically, I can't believe you're so articulate.
Articulate.
You know, my favorite. And I'm like, well, what did you expect? I mean, and I get it because we all have our own biases, and you know, reality as well as science tells us when you spend the majority of your time around people that look like you, behave like you, think like you, and you don't spend enough time or have enough exposure to people that are different from you, you have these perceived notions about them, a lot of them which come from media, unfortunately, or what you're taught or told by other folks. And so, especially for us as Black women, we often are lumped together. People fail to realize that we are not all one and the same. And so, whether you are in your free people jumpsuit or, you know, I just took out my green braids, which are probably going to come back. My hair is always going to change. I'm always going to embrace my artistic side because at heart, that's who we are. We're creative beings. And I think that actually contributes to the great work that we do as DEI practitioners. But there is such a lack of representation more often than not. Um, and it sometimes scares me. Like this year, someone close to me, they had a they had a DEI chat for Black History Month, not for Black History, just a general DEI chat, and it wasn't hosted by a Black person. And I was like, what a miss! What a miss! I was really surprised. Because to me that was an opportunity to highlight and elevate someone in that space. So yeah, just wanted to call that out. And then the last thing I'll say about sort of this traditional approach to DEI trainings and education that I've seen fail is people just throwing e-learnings at people that have not had any exposure to DEI, where it's like, here's a self-paced thing, just go check this box, much like sexual harassment training has
Yeah.
historically been, especially for larger organizations. It's easy, it's affordable, you throw it out there. But a lot of these trainings, these e-learnings that these organizations are putting out there haven't been updated. I always joke and say they were designed in MS-DOS. If you don't know what MS-DOS is, be grateful. And it leaves a lot open for interpretation. DEI education, to me, I think, yes, you can level set in a lot of ways with e-learnings and reach a lot of masses, but there needs to be something else. So you need to be able to follow up with someone like us who can ask, you can ask questions to, who can facilitate a guided conversation, because most people do not have a comprehensive understanding of what DEI is, and a check the box sort of unconscious bias training generally isn't helping anyone check their biases, identify their biases, mitigate their biases. It's not doing much of anything other than, hey, we're human and we all have unconscious bias. Look at that. Okay, bye. So,
I mean,
any other thoughts there?
I even want to expand that out a little bit
Yeah.
too. Um, and I think here I will be more, I'll use the term abrasive, you know, as Black women, we're abrasive and aggressive. Um, I'll use that. I think that it's laziness. I think it is absolute laziness. I understand that it's cost effective, but I think it's super lazy to use e-learnings. And here I will also expand it out to AI and to chatbots and to other forms of micro learning without setting the stage. And if you are going to go through e-learning of any kind, then there absolutely needs to be modules in place of just what exactly you're doing. And then there also needs to be mixed levels of learning, like you talked about,
Mm-hmm.
that yeah, there's a lot that we're doing kind of asynchronously through like chats and whatever, but there also needs to be some person to make that connection. Like there needs to be a human connection.
Right.
Um, and just kind of seeing a lot of, well, I threw this at you. It's, you know, pretty much EEOC compliance. I did the bare minimum. What do you want from me? Um, and I think that not only are missed opportunities, but are frankly just incredibly lazy and really does a disservice to those who are really trying to do the work. And it also does a disservice to those who might be curious to want to learn more. Because frankly, and I might be a bit of a Pollyanna here, but I assume that most people really do want to learn more. Now, whether they fully want to challenge their own biases, whether they fully want to do the deep and crunchy work of DEI, maybe, maybe not. But I do think that most people are frankly just at least interested in the work.
Mm-hmm.
And if their immediate reaction to it is some bargain basement 1987 version of, you know, diversity training with, you know, a
Uh-huh.
little rockin' soundtrack in the back, then no, we're turned off. No, thank you. I'm done.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I think that most people are curious, and I think a lot of people don't have a full understanding of what DEI is. And I think that's one of my favorite moments when I am going through workshops with people and coaching with people, is when I introduce DEI and the various components of it. And they're like, that's part of DEI? And I'm like, yes, 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 it is. Like, including people on your team during a team meeting, that is part of DEI, right? Um, Being mindful of, you know, inviting people to speak or share ideas, or being aware that some people on your team need a little bit more time to process or think about something, that is part of DEI, right? There are so many various ways that we can contribute, and there's no one size fits all approach. And so I think I love what you were saying about modules, and I think this is a good transition into some things that we've seen work. And for me, one of the things that has worked really, really well, that I started exploring really when I started doing consulting, are micro learnings, which basically is when it's kind of self-explanatory, but I want to make sure we're aligned, right? It's when we are basically just investing our time in small kind of time box segments. So if we're going to talk about microaggressions, maybe we just spend an hour, 90 minutes or so solely focused on that. But then we're going to come back maybe next month, next quarter, and revisit and do a follow up, right? And so the conversation keeps on, it continues, and it's not, again, just that one and done approach. Um, but we know that uh, from research, these like bite-sized continuous learning opportunities can actually really reinforce your learning and your awareness, but also they are going to get people to actually start to implement things, because it's like, okay, I know I have another session coming up in a couple of weeks. How am I going to start testing out whatever it is that I committed to, right? And it doesn't matter how big or small your commitment is. We're setting a time frame so you are able to then measure it and then come back and continue learning and to share, your learnings from it, your wins, pain points, etc. So I think that's really, really important for people as well. I see Alan added, been thinking a lot about onboarding as the entry point and assessing before trainings. Thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Karen says yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic way of framing a conversation. Um, back in 1847 when I was an undergrad, that one of my sociology professors used to always say, always again, tell them what you're going to tell them what you told them.
Mm-hmm.
And using that format, onboarding is a great way of doing the tell them what you're going to tell them, so that way everybody is in the correct headspace, everyone is level set, everyone understands the ground rules and guardrails, so that when someone goes in, they're not picking stuff from off the wall everywhere, that they're in and they're focused in, which also makes micro learning super easy because everyone knows what you're focused in on and you're not
Right.
pulling in all sorts of other stuff, and then you can come back and reinforce that knowledge. So I think that having that as a part of your sessions, having onboarding, is a fantastic idea.
Yep. And I think that is the right timing and the right place to have like e-learnings, right? Where you can't constantly be having, intro or DEI one-on-one sessions every time someone joins your team, right? But you can have a pretty straightforward, basic, here's how we're defining these terms, here's what it looks like here, here's what it means. And here are some upcoming opportunities for you to engage with someone in a live session to continue this conversation. I think there's so much benefit in that, and it allows you to keep progressing each time. So definitely, definitely. Um, from what I've seen, and I don't know if you've seen anything different, Karen, I have not come across a lot of research on microlearnings in the DEI space. So a lot of this I've only experienced hands on and seen other practitioners experience. But there is a lot of research in terms of microlearnings for a lot of other domains. And so my thinking is, well, why the heck can't we just cross these over, right? And that's what I've been doing, at least with my clients. So and kind of tied to this is knowing that you may plan for, and this goes back to one of the discussions I was having recently about the need to just scrap long-term DEI plans, because too much is changing. Too much is changing. And so why invest your time in this like 12, 20, 48-month plan or however long when it's not gonna really stick. I promise you. I have yet, in all the time I've been working in the space, I have yet to see a DEI strategy stay as it is longer than 6 months. Like, I have yet to see it. I've yet to see follow through on it. So similarly, I encounter people who are like, let's plan our trainings for the rest of the year. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds nice in theory, but in practice, our world is constantly evolving. Our workplace, especially now, with we're still in this battle of, are we remote? Are we hybrid? Do we force people back into the office? There are so many dynamics and moving parts that it just doesn't really make sense to try to plan too far ahead. Um, and so I think it's so important, and something that I really want people to do more of is listen to your people. What do they need right now? What do they need to learn? What are some of the issues? What's going on with the team dynamics? Have we assessed psychological safety? What does the team health look like? So yes, Alan, customization is real. It's so necessary, and I think historically we've been so inclined to be like, oh, I've seen this happen at organizations before, let's just roll this out, I've got a plan for you. um, and it doesn't work.
I will say, and this is again me kind of leaning on my product stuff. I think
Yeah.
that it is possible to have a roadmap without having a plan.
Ooh.
Because having a roadmap, and I very firmly believe in, like, I think that it doesn't make sense to have like the 5-10 year plan. It does not make sense. However, having a roadmap does make sense.
Agreed.
I equate it to, if I'm going to go see you in New York, there are 5 different ways I can do it. But I know my goal is to come to New York, is to go from Chicago to New York. Now, am I taking a train? Am I flying? Am I biking? Am I walking? You know, ride horse, ride cow, whatever. How am I getting there? Yes, yeah, I know. Um, so I think that having the roadmap of knowing
Mm-hmm.
where I'm going to go makes a lot of sense. Now, how I'm going to
Yes.
get there changes. That's where you start listening to your people. That's where you start to have the flexibility. That's where you do things like have prioritization exercises to determine what is important right now and to
Right.
hold that as beautiful grains of sand that may change at any time depending on what your organization needs, but to
Mm-hmm.
know that here are the things that my organization needs and to know that you may need to change that at any time. So I
Yep.
think that having the firm, here's my 5 year plan, don't do that. It's
Right.
over. That type of life is done. But I think it's very clear for organizations to have a roadmap of what they want to achieve,
Yep.
why they want to achieve it, what sort of goals are they trying to reach, and to understand that underneath that North Star of what they're trying to reach, the way they're going to get there might change over time.
Yes, absolutely. And shameless plug, as part of our DEI in five or DEI in a box series, we have a couple of e-learnings that help you kind of get to that point of making a roadmap. But yes, I think that's so important, and I still leverage roadmaps with pretty much all of my clients that I'm doing DEI strategy with, and it helps.
Yeah.
I do think I've seen people get discouraged when they don't hit certain goals or when things have to be deprioritized. And we have to remind ourselves like nothing is going to be linear. And especially if you are a DEI practitioner, just reinforcing that we must go on, right? This is an iterative process to your point. Um,
Yeah. Well, and every single one of my clients, and if you ever work with me, every single one of my clients are going to have
mm-hmm.
a roadmap.
Yes.
But I think because it's important to again know where you're going, it also is important that having a DEI roadmap smoothly integrates into the roadmap of your business and the
Mm-hmm.
roadmap of your organization, and that takes DEI out of the silo. That if you know that you're overlaying all of your DEI efforts on top of the business goals and efforts, because every business has a roadmap, every business knows what they're doing, and every
Right.
business goes through prioritization and deprioritization all the time. So DEI just becomes an extra overlay on top of that. And that way you know that it's going to happen, changes are going to happen, and people are actually going to get more buy in when they have that work.
Yes, yes. Oh, Alan, this is Karen Young. For anyone that joined a little bit late, this is Karen Young, aka the professional adult. You should be able to click on Karen's profile in the event, but if not, I am happy to share her info later. But she is one of my close partners in the DEI space. We together created DEI in a Box, which currently offers some e-learnings. We're exploring some other things like creating products and trying to figure out what we're doing with ourselves in this ever evolving landscape. But
Another
yes,
shameless plug. If you are a DEI professional or somebody who might be interested in learning more, let us know what you're looking for. Again, we're
yes,
always in a goal of looking for, again, some light touch user research, a little light touch UX, just to find out what exactly the marketplace
yes.
is looking for. So if you do have some needs, let us know. Let us know how we can help. But yes, I'm Karen Young from the Professional Adult. My focus is on strategic DEI building with a focus on converting folks from individual contributors into managers for the first time. So
Yeah. Looking forward to Karen's going to be releasing some manager tools very soon, which I've gotten a sneak peek on, and I'm really excited. I tend to work mostly with senior level execs and team on the team level to get people to kind of establish some psychological safety. So I'm looking forward to leveraging some of her tools very soon for that because we need support for our middle managers. I think I was talking about this recently on an episode of the Leadership Replace the P with a T podcast. And there's a lot of research that came out just, I think, a couple of weeks ago about how important middle managers are. So super timely that Karen's going to be rolling these
yeah.
tools out, and I will be sure to share them with everyone. Um, the last thing that I wanted to touch on today, which I think is so important and probably something that folks reach out to us a lot about, is facilitation. I don't believe, and I've been working on this for some time, trying to figure out how to teach others facilitation skills in this area. And it really does take time. It's tough, but having a skilled facilitator for your DEI workshops that is going to foster psychological safety, that is going to establish ways that people work together at the top of the discussion. So it's clear that we're being respectful, we're setting the tone for what's going on here. That also encourages honest discussions is so important. And when I say honest discussions, I don't mean someone who is inviting people in to nod along and agree with them. I tell people at the start of my sessions every time, if you have an opposing thought, perspective, or a differing opinion, let me know. Don't hesitate. Come off of mute. If we're in person, give me a shout. I've gotten to the point where I don't mind people interrupting me as I go. Um, but I think it's so important. Like, we cannot talk about diversity if I'm not also including diversity of thought and inviting people to push back on the things I'm sharing. And so I think that's so important. And it takes time to learn how to deal with those opposing points of view and how to respond to them, especially in the moment. And so if anyone has things that they've done, approaches that have worked really well in terms of educating others on how to approach these facilitation skills, we are certainly all ears. But it can be
I will
difficult.
say though, I for me, I also like I'm someone who actually really just likes debate. Like I love a good debate.
Yeah.
Um, However, I always challenge folks that if you are engaging in diversity of thought, engaging in an opposing opinion, are you doing it in good faith?
Mm-hmm.
Are you
Ooh.
actually doing this in good faith, or are you just being a jerk? I had to clean that up real quick. Are you being a jerk and just wanting to try to get a gotcha, or trying to derail the conversation, or trying to sea lion or any of that stuff, or are you actually asking a question in good faith? And if you are asking a question in good faith, are you okay with me asking about your premise? Are you okay with me asking about this? And again, any good facilitator is one that can not only give and receive as part of that dance of conversation, but can also do so in a way that externalizes the knowledge for those who might be watching the conversation happen.
Yes.
And so I think that here's another opportunity where the DEI space can really learn from other industries and philosophies and modalities. I think that there's a lot to be learned actually from our friends in the legal system and how they work through facilitations and mediations and just
Mm-hmm.
how that is structured. Like I learned a lot of my facilitation skills from how folks in the legal industry
Mm-hmm.
um, actually how they facilitate. I also learned a lot of it from how teachers facilitate conversation. There's so much we can learn
Yeah.
as coaches and teachers and consultants from all of the work that has been done in pedagogy and how much we can learn about how to frame these conversations. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's part of the goal. Like, and again, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of a workshop versus a training. The workshop is a conversation. And as part
Right.
of that conversation, you're going to have people who have differing opinions. You're going to have people who come from different perspectives. So let's hear about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen a lot of people recently having conversations around their facilitation style, and I've seen a number of DEI practitioners who like to take on a confrontational approach. Um, I'm not a fan. I've seen it too many times where not only does it cause the person to shut down and have to experience humiliation in the moment, it also changes the energy and the dynamic of the interactions with everyone else. And a lot of other people are going to check out of the conversation or disengaged or be like, oh, this isn't for me. And this is one of the things I hear as it relates to DEI trainings don't work. Um, and so I just wanted to call that out. I mean, I think it's up to each of us to decide how we approach this work. Um, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. And from the standpoint of examining, thinking about psychology, how you were just talking about, like, the legal facilitators, you have to keep people open at the end of the day if we want to see change. triggering people, having them shut down, no matter if they're polar opposite of your beliefs, experiences, etc. I don't think helps us. And I know, from my standpoint, it's hard. There's some days I'm like, did this person really just say what I think they said on the? And I have to catch myself because again, I want to make sure that I am still being influencing change in some way, and I don't want to cause people to shut down and to disengage. Um, what are your thoughts? Have you seen this? Because this was a
Oh,
recent. I saw a discussion. I wish I had the link, but I was like, wait a minute, people are really like,
oh yes. And there have been times that I have like watched facilitations and have like kind of seen what's been going on, especially like online discussions where I'm literally sitting here like I, I, and I understand what they're trying to do,
mm-hmm,
but I think that above everything else, when having conversations around DEI, that two things need to be assumed. One, you need to lead with empathy. And you need
mm-hmm,
to lead with the fact that people have shown up to have this conversation means that they're willing to have the conversation. So you need to be empathetic and hold that space for the fact that we're all here talking about this. That's something a lot of people don't do. We're here now. Let's have that conversation. And secondly, understand that people are coming from different perspectives.
mm-hmm,
And to understand that because people are coming from different perspectives, you need to frankly respect that, even if it is wildly,
yeah,
wildly different than your own. Respect the fact that that person is talking to you because of that's where they're coming from. Just
mm-hmm,
like you're talking because this is where you're coming from.
yeah,
And yeah, I've seen some facilitators and some conversations where all I'm thinking is, I don't know how you think you're accomplishing anything you think you're accomplishing. Like you have damaged so much in this space right now. Oh my God, what are you doing?
yeah, yeah. And I just want to say, I think that there is a level of confrontation that can still a healthy level and a healthy approach to confrontation in this space, right? Like if I don't know, let's say I'm in a workshop and someone misgenders another participant. A quick correction is going to come off confrontational, but how I do it is going to make all the difference. If Karen misgenders Alan and I'm like, didn't you hear Alan? Like, you need to learn pronouns. Like, Alan goes by he, him. Why? What did you miss? Right?
Right.
Versus, uh, just a quick reminder, I want to make sure everyone is being respectful of everyone's pronouns. Maybe we could go, go do a quick round and just reintroduce ourselves. Or quick reminder, Alan uses he, him pronouns. And I don't know if you use he, him pronouns, Alan. You were the first name I saw. So bear with me here. But the delivery matters. Being
Yeah.
respectful matters. That's part of establishing trust one on one with individuals, but also psychological safety. And so, not being afraid to correct people in the moment and learning how to correct people. I know when I first started facilitating ages ago, I was always like hesitant, like, oh, I don't want to say this. Or if someone used the wrong terms, I didn't want to correct them in the moment. But it matters. And it also is a practice of displaying what inclusive language can look like, for example, right? And it's also a display of what we're trying to achieve here, not to all come to a consensus, but to respect other people and to be mindful of how we're talking about other folks as well. Um, I see Alice says, oh, I do. Okay, great. Glad I'm not misgendering you. Alan says, ask what games they played as children, helps to build trust, and then ask what games we played as children. Um, that's an interesting one. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but it kind of ties to into the privilege walk a little bit here. And I think I think for more people than we are often aware of, there are scars and trauma related to childhood. So I personally often will try to avoid things relevant to people's past if I especially if I don't know what they've gone through. I've seen people break down during a privileged walk where they were all the way in the back and it was just like, why am I being put on display and othered right now for the purposes of what? I mean, I guess to bring awareness, but I don't think they're a safe approach. So I'm always iffy about asking people about their childhoods, because there's always a level of power and privilege. There's a dynamic there that impacts people and that people carry into adulthood and into workplaces. Um, I don't know what your thoughts are, Karen, but
Oh no, absolutely. The one thing I want to avoid when having any sort of conversation around DEI is humiliation. Um, and not just because it shuts people down, but for myself, I never want to be someone who humiliates someone else. Like I know what that feels like, and
empathy.
it would just crush me that even to know that even in trying to be helpful, I broke someone a little bit.
Hmm.
And so like that's why I do not do privilege walks. That's why whenever I talk about the intersectionalities of privilege, I always bring up my own and where I have them and where I don't, just to try to kind of open those doors and to realize that hey, we're all starting where we are, and that's okay.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like that, like even just kind of hearing about it just kind of makes me tense up a little bit because
Yeah.
it just opens the door to even unwittingly humiliating somebody, and I would never want to do that.
Yeah, I remember doing a privilege walk. I want to say when I was an undergrad, and it was my first experience with one. And for context, I went to NYU for undergrad. So that tells you I was in the back. I was in the back, like based on the questions they were asking, and it was the first time I was like, "Wow!" Like a lot of people have been advantaged, and it was just so eye opening to see how it's not by choice, and this makes me want to go on a tangent about this whole like merit based and work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. People can't control the situations they were born into, and they shouldn't have to feel shame or othered or embarrassment for those things. I do think there is power in having people self reflect on their power and privilege and intersectionality, but when I do that, which can be helpful, I think needs to be done on sort of an intimate basis. So if we're in a workshop and we're doing that, it's, hey, I'm going to drop a link to this document. You're going to sit here and reflect on your own, and then we'll have a conversation. And the questions are very open ended. It's not, how did you respond to this question on whatever it was? It's, what did that do for you? Are these things you've thought about? How does that impact how you are today? How is that impacting your perception of other people and, your power and privilege? I think those are important things to do, but I think we definitely have to be just mindful of putting people on blast, for lack of better words. There was something else I wanted to share, but I can't remember. It escapes me despite all the coffee I've had. Yeah, I know we're coming up on time, but yeah, I know we spend a lot of time on proper facilitation, but I think it's so important. And I think it's tough to do, especially within the context of DEI, where there's not any sort of regulation or specific guidelines that we've all aligned and agreed on. As we were just talking about, some people think the confrontational approach is the best approach. Others don't. Some people are in between, right? So it's hard. And I hope we do at some point start to align on some best practices in this space, because I do think there are some approaches that work really well. And as with all things, are constantly evolving. And it would be nice if we could just all put our brain power together and keep pushing it all forward. So,
Absolutely.
any final thoughts, Karen?
Um, as with everything in the DEI space, we're a little bit in the Wild West, which is both great and terrible. Um, but because of that, I just continue to lead with empathy and continue to lead with the fact that for anybody who is engaging with anything in DEI, you are tapping into some of the most difficult things to deal with because you're talking about people and you're talking about who we are and how we feel and how we connect with each other. Like it's the deepest and most intimate of human emotions and human connection. And
Mm-hmm.
so just to respect and honor that as you are going through your facilitations and workshops, and to start with that as the base of where you're working from. And I think that
Yeah.
that'll help to make those facilitations and trainings and workshops all that much more impactful.
Definitely, fully agree. Um, we had a question: how do you build trust? Oh, in workshops, how do you build trust? Any thoughts there?
Um, I I build trust by being vulnerable, and I build trust by being very clear right off the bat that um, this is a space for us to all talk, and there might be times where I don't get it right, and there might be times where I might be uncomfortable, and there might be times that we're all kind of working through this together, but I I want everyone to know in each of my sessions that I am here because we're all doing this work together, and that I'm here to congratulate y'all for walking in the door. Like every good coach or trainer says, the hard part was showing up. And so showing up, y'all did the hard work. So let's have the conversation. And I think that that's a good way of at least starting to build the trust.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually designed and facilitated a workshop recently about trust, and when I started, I was like, what is trust? We say it all the time, we throw it around, but what is it actually? Um, and of course, I went down the academic rabbit hole. At this point, I really need to figure out how to go get a PhD because I read so many research papers. I haven't picked up an actual book in so long because I'm always reading research papers. But not that face.
Just go ahead and look at
Um,
this face real quick. Just
I really do. I'm gonna look into it this weekend. I'm gonna put it on my calendar. Um, but when we're thinking about trust, it's pretty much what you summed up, right? It's like our willingness to be vulnerable with someone else and to have confidence in another person's truth, in their ability, in their strengths, in their word, what they're saying, what they're telling us they're going to deliver, right? Um, Trust leads us to expectations. And when you have high trust, which trust is usually one on one, you then build psychological safety. Psychological safety is a group feeling, a group belief. So that's how the two are kind of interdependent. But I think it's important to like understand trust is exactly what you just articulated. It is about vulnerability, and do I believe that you are going to stick to your word? In terms of actually building the trust, I think setting boundaries, outlining expectations. So, again, at the top of a workshop, here's how we're going to work together. I'm going to be mindful of the airtime I'm taking up. I am going to remember and remind myself that we're all coming at this from different experiences and perceptions and beliefs, all that good stuff. You can call them your session norms, your community guidelines, ground rules. I don't like the word rules, so I don't say ground rules anymore, but you get what I'm saying, right? So setting those boundaries and expectations can help build trust a lot, and you can even do that one-on-one interactions, not just workshops. Um, the way you're communicating with people matters, right? So making sure that people feel heard, making sure that you're providing people with various ways to be heard. So if I'm in a workshop, I know sometimes I've done in-person workshops where we take a break and someone comes up and they're like, I really wanted to ask this thing, but I just didn't want to ask during the session. And so I love that because I'll just take it back to the group anonymously, and we'll have a discussion, or I'll try to incorporate it in some way. Um, I think also understanding the goals and the needs of the people that you're educating is really important too. So as Karen always says start with why. So what is the why? Why are we here in the first place? And am I actually facilitating and educating in a way that is going to help us accomplish whatever the end goal is? Um, Other things, empathy, confidence, especially in a workshop. You can't come into a workshop and be like, oh, well, I think, no, you got to know what you're talking about. Front, back, sideways, round and round. Like, and sometimes, and that takes a lot of practice. And so, again, that's one of the things I'm like, I don't know how to teach people this because it's just been so hands on. It's just taken me time to experience different situations. And then the last thing I'll say is just like role modeling behavior. So, again, like that example when I was talking about if you misgender someone, correcting in the moment, that's a perfect example of what we're trying to accomplish here. And so, I can't be educating and telling you this is a best practice and then I don't actually do it. So, also important. I think those are all the things I was going
yes.
to cover.
If I can add a final,
Yes, please.
not everybody may be cut out for this work, and that's okay. That's okay. It just may not be your ministry. And I think that it's super important to realize that not everybody can do everything. And if you find that you're still kind of struggling with this, yeah, absolutely get some training, work with a coach, work with a partner to see if this works for you. But also understand that that just may not be your thing. Um, like for example, that's why Adriel and I have two different verticals of work. In my previous life before working with DEI, I've worked with senior leadership frequently. I realized I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I'm much more interested and I've gotten much more joy out of helping people grow into people management or helping people grow into leadership without the track of people management. So that's the work that I'm doing. Now, sure, I absolutely can talk to those in the C suite. I absolutely can have those conversations and do when I need to. It's just not my ministry. And I don't like doing it. And Adriel is significantly better at doing it than I am. So I don't do it. I'm really really good at taking people who are good at their jobs and growing them into the next phase of their career. I'm really good at that. So that's what you do. So just know that even within this conversation and even as you're going through and learning as a professional, there are so many places to be effective in DEI that isn't necessarily as a coach and facilitator.
Amen
And
to that.
if this isn't your ministry, know that and don't do it then.
Yeah,
And
and
that's
that's
okay.
okay. Like, yeah, I love that. I love that. The last thing I'll add is one of the best ways that for those that are like, oh, I still want to try for this facilitation thing, one of the best things that I've done for myself has been shadowing other DEI practitioners that are very skilled in facilitation, co facilitating with those skilled practitioners, and then also having them shadow me and provide me with feedback. Transformational. And yeah, I can't thank those people enough that have helped me along the way, and I think that is so important. So if you can shadow someone, find someone to shadow. A lot of people are willing. I've had people shadow me on sessions, so do that. Do that. All right. I think we covered all the things related to DEI trainings, and hopefully, despite the title of today's event, you know that DEI trainings, workshops, education instead of trainings, actually can be effective. They do work. We just need to take on a different approach from what we traditionally have. So, thank y'all for joining us. We hope this was helpful, informative, inspiring. If you have other thoughts, um, after maybe they come up later, or if you're watching the recording of this, please add a comment. We're always again welcoming new insight, perspectives, ideas, etc. So thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another topic. If you have topic ideas, let us know too. Hope y'all enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.